Call into order the regular scheduled meeting of the Hubbardston Planning Board. Planning Board meetings are broadcast live and digitally recorded. This meeting is also being held both in person and virtually through Zoom pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. So we finally have an update there, which allows public meetings to be conducted remotely so that board and committee members, as well as members of the public, can participate remotely. And Mark, just as, thank you for updating that for us, but did you notice if the new rule requires us to have a quorum in the room, or if the quorum can include online?
It can include remote.
Okay. So while
We
discussing.
do, as a town, I think we do still have to adopt the remote meeting thing in general, but.
Yeah, we'll need to do that.
I'm not sure if they ever have done that yet.
Okay. Yeah, I'll follow up with Nate again on that. So recognizing that we have attending online, Mr. Steiger, and in person, we have Bill Holman, John Demalia, and Erica Dack. And
Should we get
as
a name to it?
we're already into it.
Okay.
And as of this point, we have no associate member. So moving down the list, we have public comments. Any comments from any members of the public, either in person or online? And checking online, doesn't look like anybody has their hand up.
Maybe have Pete introduce himself again, since Francois wasn't on earlier.
Sure, just, please go ahead.
What do you want me to do? Introduce yourself.
Just say your name and your address.
Hi, Peter Russell, 20 Streeter Road, Hubbardston, Mass, 01452.
Here to check things out for the evening. All right, moving on the list, we have a series of minutes for acceptance. Francois?
Yes?
Oh, it looked like you were trying to say something.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
You're in trouble.
Moving down the list, we have minutes for acceptance. So we have the minutes for March 1st, 2023.
Can I make a motion, we accept the minutes as presented?
Absolutely. Do
I'll
we have a
second that motion.
All right, here in a first and second discussion. Do we have any amendments or changes proposed for the minutes?
There it is.
I was about to say, I'm looking to double check myself. March 1st. Yep, we got the attendance. Alright, I'm pretty happy with them. Anybody else have any changes or amendments or?
No, I already read them.
All right, so hearing none, let's have a vote. Let's go with in the room first.
Bill Holman's aye.
John Demalia, aye.
Erica Dack, aye.
And online?
Counselor Steiger, aye.
And the chair is aye. The minutes are accepted for March 1st. Next on the list, March 16th minutes.
Make the motion, we accept those minutes.
Here in a first, do we have a second?
Bill Holman's aye. Second.
Here in a first and a second. Any discussion or updates? Just give everybody a moment just to take a quick look in case they haven't. All right, anybody need any additional time?
Nope.
All right, call in a vote.
Bill Holman's aye.
Demalia, aye.
Erica Dack, aye.
Counselor Steiger, aye.
And the chair is aye. The minutes are accepted for the 16th. March 29th. Just double checking the attendance. Surprisingly long minutes for surprisingly short meetings.
A lot of talking.
They were long public notices.
That's true. Anybody need any additional time?
No, I'll make a motion, we accept those minutes.
I'll make a second of it.
Hearing a first and a second, any further discussion or comments on them?
Nope.
All right, calling a vote.
Bill Holman's aye.
John Demalia, aye.
Erica Dack, aye.
Counselor Steiger, aye.
And the chair is aye. Those minutes are accepted. So next on the agenda is new business. And we're just gonna talk about this business from an administrative standpoint. I don't wanna go too far into substantive discussion, but we have a special permit application that has been submitted to us for 243 Gardner Road. And we need to talk about how we're going to handle this, and we need to talk about whether or not we believe the application is complete. So before we get into any discussion about this,
Should we move this to the end of our, so you can stay for everything else?
I guess that is a good idea.
Because John's part of that, so he
Totally
can't.
makes sense.
So let's change the order. So changing the order, let's put that back on the table and go to other administrative matters. Well, actually, old business, we don't have any under that. Other administrative matters, master plan status update, discuss land use and open space chapters. So we've had a discussion ongoing with MRPC. We are now actively working on the master plan again. Nate's been working on it with Jonathan Voss, along with Travis. They've been making some progress. They actually just did site visits to some of the facilities, which was not done previously, which probably is one of the reasons why we had so many problems with our facilities chapter. So now that there's been some site visits and some additional discussions with the stakeholders, I expect we're gonna see a facilities chapter and an implementation chapter come back that are significantly revised and take into account the issues that we have with the need for a public safety complex and a bunch of other things. So that is certainly heading in the right direction. I don't know, Mark, if you have anything else you wanna add to that?
No, I mean, I had sent around an email to the board
Mhm.
specific to the land use and open space chapters with some ideas for you to think about, whether that's tonight or some other time.
Yep. I guess just we'll hold it as an open item, because there is significant work that's going on with open space, and there's a subcommittee, which we have sent me to go work on, that is gonna help figure out, updates to the open space plan, which will hopefully then incorporate as an update and changes to the master plan chapter on open spaces. So, that is still active and ongoing. Next down is the town center zoning project. So Mark and Nate and I had a meeting with Karen Chapman from MRPC, and we talked about this a bit. So because this was started a long time ago, it was actually assigned to the EDC instead of the planning board, even though it was a zoning initiative, just because that's the way that Ryan had applied for the grant at the time. So the EDC is still mostly running point on this, although it's now a more collaborative effort with us. But just to give everybody an update on where it's at, Jennifer Burney had left MRPC in December, and when she left, she turned over all of her documents, and there was a whole bunch of stuff in there, and that was only halfway through the process, because it was supposed to be presented to the planning board and to the EDC, and we were supposed to have sessions where we talked about what was in it, figured out what we're gonna keep, what we're not gonna keep, and we just ended up with the documents, just boom, there they are. So we being Nate, Mark and I reached out to MRPC and expressed our displeasure about how really that's only halfway through the process, we need to do something to get this back on track. So after sitting with them for a while, I've come to realize that there are some things that they propose that are usable, there are some things that they propose that I think are non-starters in this town. MRPC is gonna pick it back up with us and take some of the feedback that we provided at that meeting, and they're gonna stand behind the original contract and the original proposal
Good.
and help us go through and finish it. So where it's left at now is Karen has taken it onto her desk in order to consider the feedback that we provided at that meeting and figure out how we should.
It was just a newer agenda than the one you had.
Oh, okay, yeah, thank you. And how we're gonna go ahead and approach eating that elephant, because it's a huge deal.
Mhm.
Our town center zoning certainly needs some updating, and it is certainly a good time to update it since we're having the town center redone. So this is something that's a very, very timely issue for us. Does anybody have any questions, any thoughts, any burning desire to work on that with the EDC? Otherwise, I'll make sure the EDC is reporting back to the board regularly, either through us. And the presentation, when it happens from MRPC, I'm gonna try to schedule that as a joint session, so that everybody can hear that directly from MRPC, and we make them not have to do the song and dance for us 3 times, so.
Sounds good.
Next one is agricultural ecotourism bylaw update. This is also an MRPC project, and the good news is, we got the grant, we got the contract, we're just waiting for the signatures on it. So it's a $10,000 grant for them to go through and put to paper all of the work that was done by the Agricultural Advisory Committee. And just for the public that might be listening, the Agricultural Advisory Committee was a working group that was set up by the Select Board at the request of the Economic Development Committee and the Planning Board, in order to determine what we can do to help out farm businesses and businesses that rely on ecotourism and do constructive things with our open space while keeping them open space. So we're on track with that. The timeline on that contract, and I did send it out to the board. I don't know if anybody got a chance to look at it because I only sent it out today. But the timeline on that is actually pretty short. They're looking at getting that wrapped up by, I think it was June or July.
Yep.
So that'd be a pretty big thing. Obviously, this is town meeting, so it goes to the fall one if we have a special one. But that'd be a big deal. I know that's gonna be super popular with all of our constituents. The next one is cannabis odor complaints. We are still working to schedule a meeting to have the public meeting about the odor complaints, where we can have the permit holders present mitigation plans. We can discuss the special permit. We can have anybody who has complaints air them out in a public forum. We were originally gonna try to schedule that for tonight, but because of scheduling issues, we weren't positive that we were gonna be able to get a quorum tonight for us and the Board of Health. So we have, we've pushed that down the road. The issue that's come up with that is the rest of town government is bumping us on the 20th. So on the 20th, there's going to be a presentation of the budget to the public, and that's gonna be done as a joint session of multiple boards and committees. And it's all hands on deck. There aren't gonna be anybody to film us. And I'm not sure if they're having it here, if they're having it in the senior center or at the school.
I believe it's here.
But either way, I was told very clearly to not hold a meeting that night. So that's kind of messing with our schedule
How
a
long do
little
we
bit.
have to put this on hold, though? This has been an open issue for quite a while, right?
Well, we need to do it as soon as possible.
Yeah, but isn't there a time
there-
constraints on this?
There's not a time constraint
There
on
isn't?
it. There isn't.
Well, okay.
In the interest of fairness, I'd like to see it be as soon as possible.
Right.
Unfortunately, possible is sometimes difficult
Right.
when working with small town schedules. So, at the latest, I wanna see this on for our first meeting in May.
Yeah, because the first complaint of this was made last fall.
Well, I don't wanna get into too
Okay.
much of a substantive
Right,
discussion.
right.
Because there's some debate on what falls into being a credible complaint, because
Okay.
the first set weren't really submitted in writing and
Okay.
were submitted anonymously, and that's not what the
No,
special
it doesn't
permit,
count.
yeah. So that I think is something that's up to debate, but yes,
Okay.
at the latest, I would like to see it happen, well, I would just like to see it happen at our first meeting in May, because we're gonna get bumped, and this bleeds into our next item, which is set April-May meeting schedule. We're getting bumped out of the 20th, so we have an option where we could potentially meet on the 27th. We're gonna have an issue, we might have an issue with that, because I believe Francois is gonna be traveling for that time period, so I don't think he's gonna be able to make the meeting. I don't know if anybody else is in danger of not making it that night if we were to schedule for the
I'm
27th.
all set for all 4 of those days. I think it was 4 dates you put out there, right?
Okay.
I think I would have to be virtual, if I could probably attend virtually, but not in person that night.
Okay, how about you, Erica?
I'm good either.
Okay, so
Whatever.
maybe if it worked for the Board of Health, we could schedule that night and try to do.
The 27th?
The 27th? I don't know if you think that makes sense.
Well, I mean, it makes as much sense as anything else. It's just
Yeah.
it's just a little short notice to try and get the, get Bowie and Damon and Board of Health members
Well-
notified and get them here, but we can try.
Well, here's the second part of that. The next regular scheduled meeting is the 3rd, right after that, so.
Put it out there as either.
What's up?
Could put it out there
Right.
as either.
Yeah,
Switch.
so the other
that makes
option
sense, yeah.
is to just skip the second meeting for April and go on to the 3rd and just schedule off of that. But I do like Mark's idea of see what works for the most people for scheduling and put our meeting on whichever one works the best and skip the other one, if that makes sense to everybody.
I put it on my calendar at home, every one of those I got a meeting, so right now I'm okay.
Okay. So our next meeting will be either the 27th or the 3rd, depending upon what works for the most people and whatever we can get the Board of Health and the permit holders at.
I'll put out an email to everybody.
Okay. All right, so that'll keep that moving forward and get us. a
Before I
date.
forget, thank you for those home emails, because that really helps out a lot.
John, should stuff go to you at a personal email address?
No,
rather
the
than-
town one's fine.
Town's fine?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
A quick technical question.
Yep.
Since there are 2 special permits, do they have to be handled separately, or can they be jointly handled?
I don't see a reason they have to be separate, and I think for efficiency, it makes sense to do them together, unless they object, in which case I think we would have to look at it differently if they were to object to talking about them both on the same night. But assuming they're willing to agree to just doing a night with everybody together, I think it makes the most sense, because with the way they're right next to each other, it's
Well,
hard to say.
I could see them potentially objecting, and that's one of the reasons I think it's important for us to make sure that we have the 2 individuals who respectively requested these special permits and for whom they were granted, that we validate that that is indeed going to be okay. Again, the reason I'm saying this here is because we want to make sure that any objections or any concerns that have been raised that are common, we can certainly take those into consideration as a common issue. But if there are separate issues for each one of them, I think that we may have to therefore look at them separately.
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid comment, because,
Yeah.
I mean, depending on what tack the conversations take,
Right.
the 2 operations have different sets of conditions on their permits. They're
Right.
not the same with regard to odor issues.
Well, there's that, and I think the neighbors that are impacted and affected in each one of these cases are potentially different.
So why don't we ask the applicants if they agree to just hear it on the same night, and if they don't, we'll have to split it.
That makes sense.
Because it is logistically challenging to convene 2 joint meetings between 2 boards.
It could be done the same night, but in 2 separate time periods,
Start
right?
one and end one.
One person,
Yeah.
right, one
Right.
person's is handled, and then the next person comes up. It could still be the same night, but handled at 2 separate discussion points.
That's a good point too.
I would agree with that. Again, we just gotta make sure that
Do one quarter.
we understand the process when we're going into this here, and that we're not going to run afoul with what the expectations are in terms of how that process is going to be handled out that evening.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. There's not a lot, well, there isn't a rule book on this yet, and there aren't really a lot of predicates for us to look at. So to some measure, we're kind of figuring all of this out the first time for everybody. because the other towns that allow outdoor grows, they're only 1 year ahead of us. So it's not like there's a body of case law to come back on, so. I think the best we can do is try to be as fair as possible to everybody. But I do think perhaps splitting them into 2 meetings at the night. Mark and I will work on that, cause I think that's within my authority as the master of the agenda to figure out how to approach that. We'll talk about it, we'll ask them and talk to Nate and come to a conclusion on that once we figure out what night people can do. But thank you for the point, Francois, it is an excellent issue that you raised. Any other questions or concerns on that?
No?
Any other questions or concerns on that, Francois?
No, that was it.
Okay. So let's also hear matters not reasonably anticipated by chair. Anybody have any? How about additional public comment? And I'll call for second public comment again at the end too. Anybody online, anybody in the room? All right, so going back to new business. So we are going to switch gears and we're gonna talk about the special permit application that we received from Industrial Tower and Wireless. It is for 243 Gardner Road.
Well, I would need to
And I think we
recuse
would ask you to
myself.
leave.
Got another nice short night.
Recuse myself.
Don't let it happen again.
And just noting for the record, Mr. Damali has recused himself from discussion. Have a good night.
Good
Thank you.
night.
All right, recognizing that we still have a quorum present and we also still have a special permit quorum. All right, so we have, mind if you hand me a copy of that? Not the actual application. So we have received this application from Industrial Tower and Wireless. As I mentioned, it is for a special permit to construct and operate a wireless communications facility. The permit
Thank you, sir.
itself, there's an electronic version that is in the Google folder. It's 55 megs, so it's too big to email around. So we saved it in the drive, and we have these copies that are available here. I don't know if we have a paper copy for Francois too. I know he's on the computer,
No,
we
I
can't
just
get to
have
him now.
the 3.
Okay, well, we just have the 3 paper copies at the moment, so let us know if you need one, Francois.
No, I'm fine. I'm using the electronic copy.
Okay, so I guess to bring everybody back up to speed and refresh them in terms of special permits, and particularly ones for telephone communications. Special permits for telephone communications are covered by a federal shot clock. And that shot clock runs from when we receive the application, unless we were to decide that the application as submitted to us was not complete within 30 days of receiving it. And then that gives us an ability to toll for a little bit while the applicant goes out and collects information. So ordinarily, when we get a special permit, we decide if it is complete and we accept it. And that also has an impact on when we schedule a hearing, because we have to schedule a hearing within 65 days of receiving it. So with this particular one, once we received it, I asked Mark to go and do a completeness review of it, of the document itself. Keeping in mind there's multiple phases here. So we have the completeness phase when we determine whether or not it is substantially complete and there's something here that we can actually make a decision on, and they've turned in all the docs that they need to. That does not mean that it's a grantable application. It doesn't mean that we're making a decision on the merits, it just means that everything complies with what we need to grant this. Then there's the review phase. For the review phase, I would like to, again, hire Places Associates to go in and do that review work for us, as they've done on many special permits in the past. But that happens after this. And then there's the drafting and the finalization phase. I would also like to hire Places Associates as our technical consultants for doing that part of the process too. So ultimately where what I would like to get through tonight is find out if going that way, it is a little bit of a departure from how we've done things in the past. But the difference now is we do have Mark, who is in-house and is qualified and competent for going through and deciding whether or not an application is complete. Which makes things a little more efficient on our end, and it also potentially saves the applicant a whole bunch of money too, because it means that we're not charging those fees back to the applicant.
Mhm.
So, I would like to see if that process makes sense to everybody, or if there's anybody who has an issue with that or any questions about the process.
Sounds good to me.
Makes sense.
How about you, Francois?
So I'm sorry, but you were saying earlier that part of the work that we were leveraging Place as an associate for, did I hear you correctly that you're saying that Mark Kresge will actually do that on instead?
The completeness review portion of it. In fact, he's already done an initial completeness review.
I saw that, and so I guess my question is this here. This is something that in the past was also charged to the applicant, right?
Mhm.
So this now is being charged, but it's being charged as if it's being done by Mark?
It's not, it's part of the special permit fee itself, the regular
Okay.
underlying fee, but it's being done as administrative staff on behalf of the town, which is the way, the majority of other towns do it, where they do have access to someone in-house who's capable of looking at an application for completeness. So it would be pulling us in line with the practices of other communities.
So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. This comes within the compensation of $150 that we are receiving as part of the applicant's fee?
Yeah, it's not separately billed.
$225. I don't
Yeah.
come that cheap.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you very well. Can you repeat that, please?
225 is what Mark said, but
Okay.
it's not separately billed to the applicant. It's just, it's part of a service we provide as government.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for clarifying that. That's what I wanted to make sure, that that is actually being covered through some form of a fee and that it's not being given as a freebie.
Yep, there is the underlying fee. But, so what that would then mean is that, we would be asking Places Associates to go out and give us an estimate of the fees for the remainder of the work. So part of the other reason for asking Mark to go through and do the completeness check is that I've reached out to Bill Murray about this, and from Places Associates, our technical consultant for the public, and there's some questions that have to be answered before you can even quote a fee. And one of those is kind of an initial look at the application. So if we are in a position where it's an incomplete application and Mr. Murray has to go to it 6 or 7 times in order to get it to be something that's really worth his time looking at it, that's not helpful to the applicant, and it's also not helpful for us for trying to beat the shot clock. So we don't wanna end up in a position where it just drags on and on and on, and simultaneously racking up fees when we can just take care of this. And get Bill to a place where it's easy for him to estimate what the fees are, and also get them out on the table early on so that we have less of an opportunity for an applicant to object to them.
Sounds good.
All right. Any other thoughts or questions? Does that process make sense to you, Francois?
The process makes perfect sense. I did want to make sure that I also understand what is the date that we're using as the start date from where the shot clock starts?
So we received this on 3/27/23.
Thank you. So, and then they have, can you quickly run through the timeline here?
It's 150 days unless there is a period of time where the application is told because of incompleteness. But we have
Gotcha.
to decide.
That's what we're trying to determine at this point in time.
Yep, and we have to decide if it's incomplete within 30 days or else we waive our ability to do so. So
Correct.
that's why we
Okay.
had to talk
And
about
just for
it
a
tonight.
clarification perspective, we're talking calendar days, right?
Yes, calendar days.
Thank you.
All right.
I want to make sure we have all of these things on record.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think we have all recently had a very thorough education on the Telephone Communications Act and, or rather, the Telecommunications Act and special permits for cell towers in general. So,
Indeed.
going through it the second time, I'm optimistic it's gonna be an awful lot easier. Knock on wood. So, so assuming that that process makes sense, we'll go through this document that Mark's provided to us tonight. And then we'll make a decision on if we believe the application is currently incomplete. I think there's a chance it might be, but we'll talk about that. We'll then ask for the additional information, and we'll also ask Mr. Murray to start looking into estimating what his fee is gonna be. So with that said, Mark, can you take us through your review and what you've done so far on this?
Is that the only copy of the review that you have?
I've got
I can just listen.
one
That's
other,
fine.
but I'll have to sit behind my computer.
No, that's fine.
Can
There's
you
a
hear-
photocopier right there.
Can you hear me all right, Francois, from behind
I can
here?
do it.
I apologize, I was muted. Yes, I can hear you perfectly well.
Okay,
I know.
all right,
Yep, was it in here?
so,
Yep, I printed it out.
Oh,
so I'll look at it electronically.
I don't need papers.
Let's just run the copy off,
Better have my paper.
no need to make it harder on you.
By the way, Nate has joined the meeting. I'm assuming he doesn't have anything to say.
Nate, would you like us to promote you to a panelist? Raise your hand if you do.
thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, so Mark, please walk us through your review thus far.
Yeah, so I wanted to go through quickly and especially cover the items that are not checked as having been submitted. Just because an item has not been checked does not necessarily mean that it's a completeness item. Some of these items that aren't checked in here right now are just either waiver requests or items that I flagged that are gonna be topics of discussion as you move along. But I'll point out the ones that at this point, I consider completeness items. And then you can circle back and you can dive into specific items at whatever level of detail you wanna discuss them. So the first unchecked item is the payment of review costs, and Chris already kind of covered that in the discussion a moment ago, that we'll be getting an estimate from Bill Murray as early as possible, and then that will get presented to the applicant. They know it's coming. They have indicated that, yeah, we know we're gonna be paying for technical review costs. The next item that has not been submitted is at the bottom of the first page and is under the topic of impacts to the natural environment. And part of the narrative in the application is that the site plans incorporate substantial stormwater runoffs and drainage plans. No drainage plans were actually submitted as part of this. So clearly that's something that they need to provide.
Okay.
And-
Just to
and-
pause briefly for discussion on that, I agree with that assessment,
Mhm.
that those really need to be included in the plan for it to be a complete application for us, especially since drainage plans and drainage calculations where necessary
Mhm.
have been such a hotly debated topic of the past, and it is something that has been meaningful to the public. So for me, that's certainly going to be an issue. Does anybody else have anything to add to that point?
No, I agree.
Okay. Next item is the top of page 2, under the topic of impacts to the man-made environment. And the narrative includes a statement that the proposed tower will only be lit if required by the FAA. Obviously a true statement, but my take on it is that a company that installs towers for a living should know the answer to that and provide the answer to us.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just to pause for discussion on that again,
Mhm.
that is I view that as a material deficiency, especially since knowing from the last application, there's tools that they can use to just assess that, and
Right.
with this particular project, it's very close to an airport.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gonna be very different from the tower project that was in town in terms of lighting.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were required to have a
Right.
light on it, and that's something that has been important to the public in conversations, so we need to know one way or the other. Anybody else have anything on that one?
No, I agree with that.
All right, so topic of impacts to aesthetics, same issue, whether or not the tower is gonna be lit. Coming down to item 18.3, the location in the, not in the
Can I ask a
wireless.
quick question and point of information here?
Yep.
On the impacts to aesthetics, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you, go ahead.
Okay, I apologize. So, in the aspect of aesthetics, does the matter of whether or not the tower will be bare or will be covered? And what I mean by that is we do know that there's been instances when some towers are, for lack of a better word, camouflaged as natural, as natural, like trees and things of that nature, to look like a tree, I should say. Would that fall under this here or not?
I think it would actually fall more under a item that we're gonna get to regarding landscaping and specifications on paint and things like that.
Yep, 18.62B12, I think is where.
I'm sorry, 18.6B12?
Yep, that's where we're gonna end up talking about that about a page from now. But yeah, it is there and it is an unchecked box.
All right, thank you.
All right, so the location of the proposed tower. This is the elephant in the room, of course.
Yeah.
And will be a topic of many interesting discussions, I'm sure. I don't personally see it as a completeness issue, per se. The applicant has taken the avenues available to them to try and, I mean, they're mounting an argument on why it is allowable, and I think they've taken the available avenues to try and find the answer to this. They requested a zoning determination from the building commissioner. He basically directed them to this board.
Yeah,
So
it-
they've included his letter in the application. I don't know what, I mean, you're obviously gonna be discussing it, but I'm not sure that there's any other additional supporting information that's required.
Yeah, so it's a tough bullet point to answer without going into substantive discussion. And we should avoid substantive discussion because it's not specifically on our agenda and we don't have the applicant here. So talking about from an administrative standpoint, to build off of what Mark said, yeah, they went out and they asked for a zoning determination and they kind of got back Schrodinger's zoning determination, where it's simultaneously allowed and disallowed. So it is an issue that we're gonna have to debate and talk about, but I see what Mark's saying, that it is a substantive issue and not an administrative completeness issue. But it is gonna be a meaty substantive issue, but I don't think there's another administrative remedy to it other than, especially since the building commissioner kicked it back to us, I think it moved it out of that administrative box into substantive. So I don't know if anybody feels any differently on that, or,
No?
because Because and the other side is we've already identified that we have items that we all agree with that make this application incomplete. So it looks like we're kicking it back anyways, but I still think it's worth going through the rest of this just to know roughly where we are at on it from an administrative standpoint, so.
No, I think it makes sense.
Right, continue.
Next item, 18.4, they've requested a waiver on the type of tower construction. This is one that you heard on the last Vertex application as well. It'll be part of your review process. It's not really a completeness issue from my perspective.
Yeah, to the extent that it is, it just needs to be presented as a waiver along with some of these other issues.
Same issue on the next 18.5.2 D, they've requested a chain link fence rather than a wooden stockade. You'll discuss that as an issue during review. 18.5.2F is another reference to site drainage, which we already discussed, and that they need to present some degree of drainage plan, and what degree that should be, I think, needs to be a further topic of discussion by the board, whether tonight or at another meeting. But whether that amounts to a plan, whether it amounts to a plan and supporting calculations, you'll have to take it under consideration.
So I guess just to pause for a moment on that, this is inherently different from the last application, because the last application had the driveway which drained out onto Brigham Street, and Brigham Street is already an area where there's already a problem with outflow with water on the street. So they may not need to provide information to the same level as the last applicant, but my feeling on this is really they have to provide something.
Correct.
And
Knowing the area, it's very high in gravel, so it's probably not an issue, but it still should be part of the plan.
that they need to make that clear for us, so we're not
Correct.
just speculating.
We can't determine that.
So, how do we wanna leave that with Mark? Because ultimately Mark needs to go back to these folks and work with them.
Well, I think again, we need to have something to say that it's part of the plan and it's gonna be done. It's on our checklist, correct?
Yeah, is that clear enough feedback for you to work with the applicant on that?
Reading this, I believe we have to have drainage plans,
Yeah,
and you're
I
saying
think
there
that-
isn't any.
One item that should be accentuated here is that our engineer will also be very much looking at that with a critical eye.
And he does.
yeah.
Yes.
So they need to be aware that whatever they are presenting has to potentially satisfy reasonable components for a drainage plan, assuming that there are issues with drainage. But to also understand that Places and Associate has pretty deep knowledge and expertise in this area, and we'll be looking at this here with a very critical eye.
Correct.
Yep, that's absolutely a fair summary.
Yep.
Is that clear enough guidance for you?
I think so.
Excellent.
Okay, towards the bottom of the page, 18.6.2.B6, site detail plan. Your specs call for a site detail plan at 1 inch equals 10 feet. They've provided the highest, largest scale detail they provided is 1 inch equals 30 feet. If you feel that there's additional detail that would be useful to you at a higher scale, you could require them to provide the detail plan at the specified scale.
I don't think comes under the heading of, it's not complete, but I think that would come out of Places to determine that, correct?
It could.
Yeah, to the extent it made it impossible for them to do their review. That's probably the caveat to provide on that, well, we actually have the plans, those are the plans right there.
Yep.
Let's take an actual look at them.
This would be the largest scale detail you have of the tower pad and the equipment on it.
Again, I'm
And
not
if you,
an expert.
if you blew that same picture up to kind of this size,
Right.
that would be what you'd get back if you requested it.
I think I would like to see that blown up. I don't know if it makes a difference to Bill, to Mr. Murray.
I'd rather let him decide that because I'm okay with this. I've seen a lot of plans doing the boards that I've seen, but I'm not the professional. I'd rather have them determine that for us. Unless we require it in our bylaws and regulations, otherwise.
It is required in the bylaw, isn't it?
It is?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
that's
required
different
in the
then.
bylaw.
Okay,
Yeah.
then we should do that
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
All right, so we'll ask for that.
because I don't think it's a big consideration or a lot of work to do that. It's just another,
Yeah, I imagine
Part of
it'll
the site
be like an hour for somebody to pull it out
Yeah.
and print it, so. Okay, so we'll provide that for feedback.
All right, next page. Here we get to Francois's previous question.
he looked ahead.
So the two items on landscaping and finish techniques and camouflage and all that kind of thing, including the requirements call for a stamped landscape plan. Their position on this is that this is set back so far from the road and up in a wooded area that nobody is going to be able to see this beautiful landscaping, and it doesn't matter. So
Well,
that's.
that's for us to determine as a board.
Exactly.
But at this point in time, without something very specifically indicated within their submission, I would say that this is incomplete unless that is included. I would agree with you, Mark.
What did the last applicant submit to us? Because we did ultimately decide that with the last applicant,
Oh,
but I don't think we decided it until after the balloon test and,
Oh, I wasn't part of the hearing, that's right.
yeah.
I couldn't be here.
So, because I don't wanna hold them to a standard different from the last applicant.
And that's fair to do it the same. But again, it's a different site too.
Yeah, that's true
Different
too.
considerations, and this is right in the center of town.
Similar issue though, it's, both sites are set back quite a ways from any road where you could observe directly those structures.
Yeah, they're
But I
both-
believe this one here, you're gonna see from the town center of where they're proposing. And again, I'm not the professional,
Yeah.
but I don't think anybody's gonna see it. Just looking here at the map too.
Yeah, there were like 3 sites out of the balloon test where you could actually see the last one.
Right.
Cause they're both almost 1,000 feet off the road. So, is this one that far off?
Don't recall. Might not be that far.
Yeah, cause the Vertex one was between 1,000 and 1,200 feet off the road.
Again, it all
Not just off
depends on the
road, from
elevation too.
structure. Yeah.
The distance plus the elevation. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it.
Oh, watch out.
You're tripping me.
This is more like 600, 650 feet from the road.
Alright, so 3-minute recess.
So I guess the question here is, I mean, if the ultimate answer is that you're
We're on
gonna
a
want.
brief recess.
Yeah, sorry.
to the special permit for the proposed cell tower at 243 Gardner Road.
Just on the last item we were just discussing, again, I think that would fall under review by a professional to let us know what we actually need to have. If our bylaw says we have to have it, then
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to go. And we, in all our other determinations, we've always had a review we could go by.
How big of a deal is it for them to just provide it? Because, and how different would it be from essentially what they're already presenting? So I guess if they're saying, well, we don't really have to do landscaping, here's a map that essentially has the tower facility on it. Granted with nothing on it, because there's no trees or no screen plantings or anything that are necessitated. But then I guess that raises the question, are we asking them to do a useless thing? Because it may not even be necessary because of the location.
But wouldn't it be better to have our
That's what-
professional review, let us know what we really should have for this, and if it's far enough back or not? Because I don't
So-
think we can determine
Francois?
that.
I apologize, I didn't mean to cut you off, Bill.
Oh,
Go
no
ahead,
problem.
finish up.
He did finish.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, the point I wanted to make here is that in the applicant's documentation, that assertion needs to be made and needs to be made with a reason for why it's not included. And that then becomes part of what what Bill Murray and Places and Associates would use as part of their evaluation and their assessment, and then come up with their own opinion.
That makes sense.
I think that makes sense where,
Mhm.
even if it's not a plan, if it's a more
Explanation.
detailed explanation, specifying the distance from the road, specifying the distance
Correct.
from the other things, and arguing essentially the same point that ultimately came out in our last special permit decision.
I like that.
As opposed to just giving us given the proposed will set back from the road due to significant vegetation, like giving us some facts on that, or a plan.
That's correct. So it basically indicates that it was not ignored on their side, but rather it is being accounted for these reasons. It is not applicable, and they need to state that. And that is certainly something that Places and Associates would utilize to make their own assessment and comparison, and be able to argue either as, yes, we agree, or no, because of these other particularities.
No, I agree. That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
That's good enough guidance for you?
Yep.
All right, so moving along.
All right, bottom of the page, 1862C5. Article 18 limits the life of the special permit to 5 years. They're taking exception to this under commercial concerns. I think this also falls into the category of a discussion that you would have along the way during the review process. I'm not sure
Yeah,
if there's anything that's required
It's,
at this point.
to me, it definitely looks substantive and not administrative.
Did this come up with the other tower?
No, it didn't.
No?
Yeah, surprisingly, it did not.
No, I don't think so either.
Literally everything else came up with the other tower, but not that.
I'm glad I missed it.
And the final item is the form of the cast surety. I actually didn't understand their sentence of what they were proposing, but it seems to be acknowledging that they're gonna submit something.
Yeah, and we, on the last project, we did do a waiver there. I don't know if we did it as a formal waiver, but we made it a finding in the special permit where we did allow the applicant to do a bond, and we set all kinds of criteria for the value of that bond. I need to get those brain cells back, but it wasn't as clear as just a $25,000 bond. And there was also some some strings for decommissioning and such that were attached to that too. But yeah, I would suggest that that's a substantive discussion and that they should look to our previous decision on that. That's,
So that was my input, and,
And thank you for doing that, that's
yeah.
very helpful.
I did want to remark on one additional item, if I may, quickly, because this was very controversial last time around when we had the Vertex. The balloon test, I know it says, and they state in their, under item 18.5.2.a, that they would perform a balloon test from 8 AM to 2 PM. I just want to remark on the fact that I think that we should set the standard for when and how the balloon test will be conducted. I would like to see that they are agreeing to a balloon test and for us to put the standard, just to make sure that if perchance we deem that the hours between 8 AM and 2 PM are not sufficient, then we have the prerogative to extend that if it were necessary.
I like
Yeah,
that.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
That did result in several hours of public discussion.
Hours?
Right.
Yeah, yeah, several hours.
So I'm seeing here that, I mean, the applicant says basically, applicant agrees to perform a balloon test if the planning board deems the balloon test to be necessary. Winds are generally significantly less in the early morning of the applicant proposing the flight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they're saying the applicant proposes to fly the balloon from 8 AM to 2 PM on a day to be determined by the public hearing on the applicants. That
Yeah.
is fine, but I think we need to just make sure that they understand. And I think from a completeness perspective, they are complete here. But I think we just need to make sure that they are aware that we as a board have the final determination on how long that balloon test needs to last.
yeah.
I
Good- good-
agree with that.
Good point, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I
Yes.
had meant to discuss this item.
That's a good item.
Yeah, cause ultimately, we had to issue a waiver for it to not be a in-the-dark 24-hour balloon test.
Right.
Which,
I did hear a lot of complaints to people, because they knew I'm on the planning board, about the tower, and they didn't have an opportunity, because they had to work, they didn't get a chance to even look at it.
yeah,
So,
Yeah.
that'll be an issue.
Yeah, the other communication that I wanted to direct back to the applicant was that in your last application, you made the interpretation that the notification was to every resident in the town.
yeah.
And they've said here, all the butters, so I wanna put the applicant on notice that, yeah, that's not quite the way.
Yeah,
we interpret
that's not how the
that.
bylaw is written. And, but the good news for them on that is it turned out to be way cheaper than anyone expected to send out a mailing to everyone in town. It was only $3.50, $3.25, something like that. It was relatively short money to send a postcard to every house.
Right.
And I would also like to remind them to be very sure to check the spelling and the location of the town that gets written on that card and sent out to every house.
Yeah,
Yeah,
did they have to redo it?
no, they decided not to.
I think I remember getting the card too.
Yeah, we ultimately decided it was up to them whether or not they wanted to shoulder the risk of that being an issue for possible appeal, and they decided they were willing to shoulder that risk. So, we let that go.
Spell check.
All right, so we've gone through the completeness review that was prepared by Mark. It sounded to me like there are some items that they need to get into us for this to be a complete application.
I agree.
Hearing that, I think we should take a vote, actually, finding that the application is incomplete.
I'll make a
Do you
motion
agree with
that-
that, Mark, that we should have a vote on that?
Yeah,
I
certainly
think we
can
should.
at your
Sound-
discretion.
Sounds good to me.
I'll make that motion.
Here in a first, do I have a second?
I second the motion.
All right, so we have a first and a second on the table, and the motion is for the planning board to determine that this application submitted for 243 Gardner Road by Industrial Tower and Wireless is incomplete and requires additional information as outlined in tonight's meeting. Hearing a first and a second, any additional discussion?
I'm all set, sir.
we just need to make sure that they're aware that this is as of the 5th of April, so that again, that the shot clock has to be, not reset, but has to be stopped right now. And so they understand how much time, they have to add to the clock at on the other end.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna draft this, and I'm gonna run the correspondence by you before it goes out.
Sounds good.
I know I'm stating the obvious here with you, Mark, because you're
Yeah.
very conscious of these types of things.
It's always good to bring it up, though.
All right, any further discussion on that?
No.
All right, hearing no further discussion, calling a vote,
Bill Holman's aye.
Erica Dack, aye.
Counselor Steiger, aye.
and the chair is aye, the motion carries.
Can I make one more request from Mark, or maybe, and just quickly as a discussion item? I know the aspect of a backup generator to power the towers. It has been discussed, but I don't think there's anything either in the applicant's submission nor in our bylaws. Is there a possibility for us to request, and I'm just opening this up for our board to quickly discuss, is it appropriate for us to ask them if the tower itself will have a backup power in the event that there is no electric power that comes from the grid?
Well, the other thing is how long.
They're showing a typical generic detail of a propane generator
Yeah.
being part of the installation.
It came up with Vertex when we were discussing that one, and I know there's a question as to how long
Right.
the generator lasts for, but that the towers do generally come with backup power, but it sounded like that there is a discussion point on the amount of time that they last, whether they get set up to last for hours or days, and what's commercially pragmatic to
Did it,
them.
it hasn't come.
And do we know whether or not that information, I'm trying to look into this here at the, in the applicant's submission here.
I don't think there's
And I'm
sufficient
not
detail
sure I'm seeing
to
that.
determine that.
Maybe you have that information, Mark, or no?
Yeah, I know on Vertex, they did that through testimony. I don't think it was in the, it stated that there was backup power on site, but the time period the backup power went for was something that came out in testimony, not, I don't believe in writing. So, yeah, I think
Okay.
that's worth investigating, because I know that that is certainly a big deal to the public, especially with the last series of storms that went through.
Mhm.
Precisely,
And that,
precisely.
better than 3/4 of the town has expressed their opinion through polling that cell access and emergency access to communications.
What I could do is add that to the list, under equipment specifications and request a little additional detail.
Yeah.
on Generator life.
I'm surprised that they don't require this automatically just with the state or the federal government.
Well, I think that's up to us to put in a revised version of our wireless communications bylaw, which honestly, I was hoping that we would have got to before we got another application, but this one kind of snuck up on us.
You think?
And there's only a few of us, and there is an awful lot of work that goes into any bylaw revision, and we made decisions to prioritize what we did.
Right.
So we didn't get to the process of modernizing our wireless bylaw. Because there is stuff in it that's confusing, like, can you make a lattice tower? Can you not?
Mhm.
Does it have to be monopole? Like that, those are legitimate questions because of the draftsmanship of our wireless bylaw. So we still have to keep that on the project list to update, but we didn't get to it before this one. So we have what we have. With that, any other questions or comments on anything? Opening for public or board comment?
My only comment here is that, Mark, you did an excellent job, and thank you so much for lining the summary up for us. This made a big difference here.
Saves everybody a lot of time and money, so thank you.
Yeah, this is super helpful and a really good job you did. Thank you.
Absolutely, very useful. Thank you so much.
Very good.
All right, so, no public comment? All right, so hearing no public comment and no additional comments from the board, would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Hearing a first, do we have a second?
I second the motion.
Hearing a first and a second, non-debatable, calling a vote.
Do we vote on that?
Yeah, we do.
Well, I'm not gonna vote, no, aye.
Erica Dag, aye.
Counselor Steiger, aye.
Aye.
And the chair is aye, we are adjourned.
Imagine if I had said